Last month, or at the beginning of this month, I was in Warsaw working on Chopin's last Pleyel, which turned out to be a little bit of a speculation. Last summer I saw it, and here's this piano which had been basically buried in a graveyard for 60 years in the museum, exhibited as a silent wreck. They felt that they had destroyed the piano by putting modern strings on in 1960 or 59 or something, 1962, I don't have the dates exactly. But the only thing they did was to ruin the tone, and then by replacing those modern strings, which were much too thick and much too stiff and everything wrong, replacing with period correct, basically nearly pure iron, for a very conservative scale, which was retained by Pleyel even until 1848, where it's an iron scale, as we learned from the computer. And putting iron strings on this thing, and it's so astonishing the way this piano just became so exuberant in a very expressive way from the first notes played 36 hours after tuning it up for the first time. It was a really emotional thing. Everybody felt it who heard this performance. Alexander Schwiegut just tried it a little bit, thought she was on her way to church and had to touch some, sort of back together piano a little bit. But here it was, I may say, concert ready. Even, the strings are brand new and stuff. But it's so effective. And I want to say that is the last Pleyel piano of Chopin. And what we have here is basically the first Pleyel which Chopin encountered when he moved to Paris. And wrote distinctly about it being, known, Pleyel is non plus ultra. And we have the, so to say, the signature of Camille Pleyel, the builder, and his concept, as his father comes from Austria, and there is this understanding of, piano sound and the piano culture of the 1820s, in which there's a lot of Hummel and a lot of transparency still, and a lot of a kind of lightness and color. Things are lit from underneath. And that's the kind of sound this thing still makes. And I must say that, rather this new piano does, I think, recreate very correctly with its leather hammers. And, the way the hammers are mounted in such a way that they never quite hit square onto the string. They're a little bit always like this. And I think there's there's a way to hit with a little delicate percussion stick, a little bit off center, who knows. But it was the intention, and it was indeed retained in other examples from 1830 that we know about. And the leather hammers are particular with their measures and their number of layers and so forth. But we arrive at a very satisfactory solution with this piano. I find that the leather itself is malleable, so to say, plastic in your hands. As you are creating the shape of this percussion, this little drumstick, so to say. The effect that finely gradated hammers are very delicate. The effect that they have, the way they hit the string, the way they bounce off, and the way that you can create on the top of the hammer, in some way to shape it a little bit. You can mash it around, and here's an iron and so forth, and you can kind of get an effect somehow to represent what Chopin is saying when he says he's playing with his Pleyel, and he can feel the strings with his fingers, which is very evocative. And it's a little bit the sensitivity and the closeness to the string in the English mechanism is kind of unusual, that you can just carry yourself right to the string with no effort, and then the key stops. There's not this extra clunk on the end of the keystroke, which you have in the Erard mechanism, which is basically the modern mechanism. It's a very different sort of tool, as it were, to get the hammer to the string. And the directness and freedom of this movement, I think it suggests itself to someone like Chopin, that he's got his fingers in the strings. And we can play around as builders with forming the shape of this hammer as somehow, Chopin's delicate fingertips. And there's a way to make a sound where it has, if you have leather on the hammer, you have a contact sound. And the kind of, at the ictus, at the beginning of the note, there is this contact sound, which is not, it's soft, but there is a real moment of, speech. At the beginning, it's not a blowing sound. As the modern piano, you play it and then the sound swells out from that. You don't know where the sound begins. But here we're still in the world where a note has a beginning, and it's an articulate kind of quality of speech. We're still in that world. And music has its different rhetoric. It has the private rhetoric of Chopin, the inner rhetoric, and not, so to say, this sort of, it's not the age of enlightenment and this kind of self-assured rhetoric of Haydn, charm and wit. There's something else going on, and it's deep and it's inward, and is it real, is it not? The world of Chopin. You have a different quality of rhetoric and a different quality of speech, but it is still tactile. If he's speaking of playing his fingers on the strings, it's tactile. He can feel it. So notes are created with kind of a definition that kind of only leather will bring. And it's very effective. And I'm very appreciative that this has worked out so well in that direction. It's not easy, I can tell you. And as for the last piano of Chopin with the felt hammers, which became rather standard after maybe 1835, and standard meaning that can be any kind of felt, but the leather is out of picture, basically, later in the 1830s. But it began with this very confident and, knowing use of materials in 1830, a little bit different. And it's a sound which is not, I want to say that piano sound per se is not changed entirely by the change of material. You're getting somewhere within the same box of what is too much and what is too little, and what's too bright and what's too dark, and what's too far away, and what is nicely delivered and projecting, and all these questions about music and acoustics. You can do kind of the same with different material. The felt is working in this way.